Jalen stood frozen, staring at the eviction notice. But 30 days to leave. He was drowning in debt, raising his 6-year-old daughter alone after his wife died, and his job barely covered rent. But at his lowest point, his cold, untouchable CEO, Victoria, called him into her office and made an insane offer. "Marry me for 1 year. I'll erase all your debt." A contract marriage. A woman who didn't believe in emotion. A man on the edge of collapse. Would this deal save Jalen or destroy him completely? Jalen hadn't slept in 3 days. He sat at the tiny kitchen table in his cramped apartment, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay. Medical debt from when his wife was in the hospital. Rent overdue by 2 months. His daughter's school tuition notice stamped in red. Final warning. His daughter Maya was asleep in the next room. She was 6 years old. She didn't know they were about to lose their home. Jalen pressed his palms against his eyes and rubbed his face, exhaustion weighing heavy on his dark skin. He'd been working double shifts at the marketing firm where he was employed, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. His wife had died in a car accident 2 years ago, and the hospital bills alone had buried him. He tried everything. Loans, credit cards, borrowed money from friends who stopped answering his calls. Now the eviction notice sat in front of him like a death sentence. 30 days. He looked at the door to Maya's room. She deserved better than this. She deserved a father who could give her stability, safety, a future. Instead, she had him a man who couldn't even keep a roof over her head. Jalen's phone buzzed. A message from his boss. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. 9 sharp." He stared at the text. Victoria Lawson didn't send messages like this unless something was wrong. She was the CEO of the company, a woman so sharp and cold that people in the office whispered about her like she was made of ice. Jalen had worked under her for 3 years and had maybe spoken to her directly 5 times. He typed back a quick reply, "I'll be there." Then he went to bed, knowing he wouldn't sleep. The next morning, Jalen stood outside Victoria's office on the top floor. He caught his reflection in the glass wall, a tall black man in a suit that had seen better days, trying to look like he belonged in a world that had never made room for people like him. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Through the glass walls, he could see her sitting at her desk, perfectly composed. She wore a tailored black suit. Her dark hair was pulled back. She didn't look up. He knocked. Victoria's voice came through, clipped and precise. "Come in." Jalen stepped inside. The office was massive, all clean lines and minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit," she said. He did. Victoria set down the pen she'd been holding and looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, unreadable. She didn't waste time. "I know everything about you, Jalen," she said. He blinked. "I'm sorry." Victoria slid a folder across the desk. Jalen opened it. Inside were copies of his bills, his bank statements, his eviction notice, medical records from when his wife died, even a report on Maya's school payments. His stomach dropped. "How did you, Victoria, cut him off? I had you investigated." Jalen's hands tightened on the folder. "Why?" She leaned back in her chair, studying him like he was a piece of data. "Because I need something from you, and you need something from me." Jalen didn't know what to say. His thoughts were spinning. Victoria continued, her tone businesslike. "I'm 32 years old. I built this company from the ground up. I'm worth more than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. But my parents have given me an ultimatum. If I don't get married within 6 months, they'll revoke my inheritance and hand control of the family empire to my brother." Jalen stared at her. "You're telling me this because Victoria's expression didn't change. Because I'm offering you a deal." She opened a drawer and pulled out a contract. It was thick, bound in leather. She placed it in front of him. "I need a husband for 1 year," Victoria said. "You need financial stability. This is a transaction, nothing more." Jalen looked down at the contract. The words blurred in front of him. Victoria kept talking. "The terms are simple. You move into my penthouse. We live together. We attend public events as a married couple. You follow my instructions on how to behave in social settings. In exchange, I will pay off every cent of your debt. All of it. Medical bills, rent, school tuition, everything. Jalen's throat was dry, and after a year, we divorce, Victoria said quietly. You walk away with $200,000 and a clean slate. Your daughter can stay with a trusted relative during this time. I'll cover all her expenses. Jalen felt like the room was spinning. You want me to sell myself? Victoria's gaze didn't waver. I want you to make a smart decision. You're out of options, Jalen. In 30 days, you'll be homeless. Your daughter will end up in a situation neither of you can recover from. This is your way out. He looked down at the contract again. His hands were shaking. Why me? He asked. Victoria tilted her head slightly. Because you're not a threat. You're not from my world. No one will suspect this is anything other than what I tell them. It is a whirlwind romance. You're ordinary, forgettable, perfect. The words stung, but Jalen couldn't argue. He was ordinary. He was drowning. Victoria stood and walked to the window, her back to him. I don't believe in love, Jalen. I believe in control. This arrangement gives me what I need. If it gives you what you need as well, then we both win. Jalen stared at the contract. The pages were filled with clauses, conditions, legal terms he didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. If he signed this, his life would change. He thought of Maya, her small voice asking him if they were going to be okay. The way she pretended not to notice when there wasn't enough food. He thought of the eviction notice. He thought of the fact that he had no other choice. What if I say no? Jalen asked. Victoria turned to face him. Then you leave, and we never speak of this again. She walked back to her desk and sat down, picking up her pen like the conversation was already over. Jalen's heart was pounding. He looked at the contract one more time. Then he looked at Victoria. I need to think about it, he said. Victoria nodded. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer expires. Jalen stood, his legs unsteady. He walked to the door, the folder still in his hands. As he reached for the handle, Victoria spoke again. One more thing, she said. He turned. Her expression was unreadable. If you sign, you follow my rules. All of them. No exceptions, no emotions, no complications. Do you understand? Jalen nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. He left the office and didn't look back. That night, Jalen sat on the floor of Maya's room, watching her sleep. She was curled up under a thin blanket, her braids spread across the pillow, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm. She looked so small, so fragile. He thought about what Victoria had said. You're out of options. She was right. He thought about the eviction notice, about the debt collectors who called every day, about the look on Maya's face when he told her they couldn't afford her birthday present last year. He thought about Victoria's cold, emotionless eyes, about the life she was offering him, a life that felt like selling his soul. But then he thought about Maya waking up on the street, thought about losing her to the system because he couldn't provide for her. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. The next morning, Jalen walked back into Victoria's office. He didn't say anything. He just picked up the pen and signed the contract. Victoria watched him, her expression unchanged. When he was done, she took the contract and filed it away. Pack your things, she said. You move in tonight? Jalen nodded. His hands were still shaking. One more thing, Victoria added. She handed him a sleek black credit card. Use this for anything you need. Clothes, transportation, whatever. You'll need to look the part. He took the card. It felt heavy in his hand. As he turned to leave, Victoria spoke one last time. Welcome to your new life, Jalen. He walked out of the office, knowing there was no going back. The penthouse was nothing like Jalen had imagined. It was cold, not in temperature, but in feeling. Everything was white, or gray, or black. Sharp edges, clean surfaces, no photographs, no clutter. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Victoria stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, watching the city below. She didn't turn when Jalen stepped inside with his single suitcase. Your room is down the hall, she said. Second door on the left. Don't touch anything in my office. Don't go into my bedroom, and don't expect me to be here often. I work late. Jalen nodded, though she wasn't looking at him. He carried his suitcase to the room she'd indicated. It was larger than his entire apartment had been. The bed was massive, the sheets crisp and white. There was a closet big enough to live in, a bathroom with marble counters. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Maya was gone. He'd driven her to his cousin's place 2 hours away that morning. She'd cried when he left, her little brown face streaked with tears. He'd told her it was temporary, that he was figuring things out, that she'd be back soon. She'd nodded, but her eyes had been full of questions he couldn't answer. Now he was alone in a stranger's home, pretending to be someone he wasn't. The first week was awkward. Victoria left before sunrise and came home after midnight. They barely spoke. Jalen spent his days at work, pretending everything was normal and his evenings wandering the penthouse like a ghost. He tried calling Maya every night, but his cousin said she was adjusting, that she was okay. Jalen wasn't sure he believed it. On the 8th day, Victoria came home earlier than usual. It was only 10. Jalen was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. When she walked in, she looked exhausted. Her suit jacket was draped over her arm, her hair slightly disheveled. She set her briefcase on the counter and glanced at him. "You cook?" she asked. Jalen shrugged. "Not really, just sandwiches." Victoria looked at the ingredients on the counter. Bread, cheese, turkey slices. She didn't say anything for a moment, then opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. "There's soup in the cabinet," Jalen said. "If you're hungry." Victoria turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't ask you to cook for me." "I know," Jalen said, "but you look like you haven't eaten all day." She stared at him, then looked away. "I'm fine," but she didn't move. She stood there, holding the water bottle, looking at the counter like she didn't know what to do with herself. Jalen opened the cabinet and took out a can of soup. He heated it on the stove without asking. When it was ready, he poured it into a bowl and set it on the table. "Sit," he said. Victoria looked at him, then at the bowl. She didn't argue. She sat down and ate in silence. Jalen didn't say anything. He just finished making his sandwich and sat across from her. When she was done, Victoria set the spoon down and looked at him. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was the first time she'd said those words to him. 2 weeks later, Victoria called him into the living room. She was holding a tablet, scrolling through something. "We have our first public event this weekend," she said. "A charity gala. We'll need to attend together." Jalen felt his stomach tighten. "What do I need to do?" Victoria handed him the tablet. On the screen was a list of instructions. How to dress, how to stand, what to say, what not to say. "Memorize this," Victoria said. "You'll be playing the role of my loving husband. That means you hold my hand, you smile, you laugh at my jokes, even if they're not funny. You make people believe we're in love." Jalen looked at the list. It felt like studying for a test he didn't want to take. "Can you do that?" Victoria asked. Jalen met her eyes. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "No, you don't." The gala was held in a hotel ballroom that looked like it cost more than Jalen's entire life. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Everyone was dressed in suits and gowns that probably cost thousands of dollars. Jalen felt like an imposter. He was one of the few black faces in a sea of old money and inherited privilege. Victoria stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She looked perfect. Her dress was dark blue, elegant, fitted. Her makeup was flawless. She smiled at people as they approached, introduced Jalen as her husband, laughed at their jokes. Jalen played his part. He smiled. He shook hands. He said the things Victoria had told him to say, but he could feel the eyes on him, the whispers. People were curious. Who was this man? Where did he come from? Why would someone like Victoria Lawson marry someone like him? At one point, a man approached them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the same sharp features as Victoria. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Victoria," he said smoothly, "introduce me to your husband." Victoria's grip on Jalen's arm tightened slightly. "Brandon, this is Jalen. Jalen, this is my brother." Brandon extended his hand. Jalen shook it. Brandon's grip was firm, almost aggressive. "So, you're the one?" Brandon said, his tone casual, but laced with something else. "I have to admit, I was surprised when I heard the news." Victoria's never been the romantic type. Jalen forced a smile. "People change." Brandon's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do they?" Victoria stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "We should get back to the guests." "Excuse us, Brandon." She pulled Jalen away before Brandon could respond. When they were far enough away, Jalen glanced at her. "He doesn't believe us." Victoria's jaw was tight. "He doesn't need to. He just needs to stay out of our way." But Jalen could see it in her eyes. Brandon was a problem. That night, back at the penthouse, Jalen found Victoria standing on the balcony. She was still in her gown, her arms wrapped around herself. The city lights stretched out below her. Jalen stepped outside. "You okay?" Victoria didn't turn. "Brandon's going to dig. He's going to try to find something to prove this isn't real." Jalen leaned against the railing. "What happens if he does?" Victoria's voice was quiet. "Then, I lose everything." For the first time, Jalen saw something in her that wasn't cold or controlled. She looked afraid. He didn't know what to say. So, he just stood there beside her, the silence stretching between them. After a long moment, Victoria spoke again. "Why did you really sign the contract, Jalen?" He looked at her. "You know why?" "I didn't have a choice." Victoria shook her head. "Everyone has a choice. You could have walked away, found another way, but you didn't." Jalen thought about Maya. About the eviction notice, about the feeling of drowning. "I signed because I was scared," he said. "Scared of failing my daughter. Scared of losing the only thing I had left." Victoria turned to him. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded. "I signed because I was scared too," she said. "Scared of being alone. Scared of proving my family right, that I'm nothing without them." It was the first time she'd admitted anything real to him. They stood there in the silence, two strangers bound by fear, pretending to be something they weren't. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Victoria started coming home earlier. She'd find Jalen in the kitchen, and instead of retreating to her office, she'd sit at the counter and watch him cook. Sometimes she'd ask about his day. Sometimes she'd tell him about hers. One night, Jalen made pasta. It was simple, nothing fancy, but Victoria ate every bite. When she was done, she looked at him and smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one she wore at events. "This is good," she said. Jalen shrugged. "It's just pasta." "No," Victoria said. "It's more than that." She didn't explain what she meant, but Jalen thought he understood. A few days later, Jalen received a call from his cousin. She told him Maya was doing well, but she missed him. She wanted to come home. Jalen felt his chest tighten. He wanted to see her, too. But how could he explain this life to her? How could he bring her into this arrangement that night? He told Victoria. She listened without interrupting. When he was done, she stood and walked to her office. A few minutes later, she came back with her phone. "I'll arrange for you to see her this weekend." Victoria said, "I'll have a car take you." Jalen stared at her. "You don't have to." "I do," Victoria said firmly. "You shouldn't be separated from your daughter." The next Saturday, Jalen drove 2 hours to see Maya. When she ran into his arms, he held her so tight he thought he might break. He breathed in the familiar scent of the shea butter his cousin had used on her hair. She asked him if he was okay, if he was eating enough, if he was coming back soon. He told her he was working things out, that everything would be okay. When he returned to the penthouse, Victoria was waiting. She didn't ask how it went. She just handed him a cup of coffee and sat beside him on the couch. "Thank you," Jalen said. Victoria nodded. "You're a good father." It was the kindest thing she'd ever said to him. But things weren't getting easier. Brandon was circling. He'd been asking questions, digging into Jalen's background, trying to find cracks in their story. At a family dinner, he'd cornered Jalen in the hallway. "You think you're clever?" Brandon had said, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can just waltz into this family and take what's mine?" Jalen had kept his voice steady. "I'm not taking anything. I'm just here." Brandon had leaned in close. You're a nobody, Jalen. A poor, desperate nobody. And when this falls apart, and it will, you'll go back to being exactly what you are. Nothing. The words had stung because part of Jalen believed them. One evening, Jalen came home to find Victoria on the couch, her laptop open, her face pale. She looked up when he walked in. What's wrong? Jalen asked. Victoria turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was an email from Brandon. Attached was a document evidence of Jalen's financial history, his debts, his eviction notice, everything. He's going to use this, Victoria said. He's going to show it to the board, to my parents. He's going to prove this is fake. Jalen's stomach dropped. What do we do? Victoria closed the laptop. We can't let him win. But Jalen could see the fear in her eyes. 2 days later, Victoria's mother invited them to dinner at the family estate. It was a trap, and they both knew it. But they couldn't refuse. The house was massive, cold, intimidating. Brandon was already there when they arrived, sitting at the head of the table with a smug smile. Dinner was tense. Brandon made pointed comments, testing them, watching for cracks. Victoria handled it with grace, but Jalen could see the strain on her face. After dinner, Victoria's mother suggested they take a walk through the garden. Victoria and Jalen followed her outside, but Brandon stayed behind. When they returned to the house, Victoria needed to grab something from her childhood bedroom. Jalen followed her upstairs. The room was pristine, untouched, like a museum. Victoria was searching through a drawer when Jalen noticed something odd. A small camera hidden in the corner of the bookshelf. His blood ran cold. Victoria, he said quietly. She turned. He pointed to the camera. Her eyes went wide. Brandon. Jalen's thoughts were racing. If Brandon was watching, if he saw them acting distant or cold, he'd have the proof he needed. Without thinking, Jalen moved. He crossed the room, pulled Victoria into his arms, and kissed her. For a split second, Victoria froze. Then she kissed him back. It wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't fake. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, Jalen reached up and switched off the light, plunging the room into darkness. The camera wouldn't see anything now. They stood there in the dark, breathing hard, neither of them speaking. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Jalen, but he didn't let her finish. He pulled her close again, his forehead resting against hers. I know, he said, and he did because somewhere along the way this had stopped being an arrangement. It had become something else. That night, back at the penthouse, neither of them spoke about what had happened. Victoria went to her room. Jalen went to his, but he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the kiss, about the way Victoria had looked at him afterward, about the way his heart had raced. He was in love with her. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was in love with a woman who'd hired him to play a role, a woman who didn't believe in love, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, Victoria was different. She came out of her room earlier than usual, but she didn't look at him. She made coffee, her movements stiff and mechanical. We need to talk about last night, Jalen said. Victoria shook her head. There's nothing to talk about. We did what we had to do, that's all. But her voice wavered. Jalen stepped closer. Victoria, She held up a hand. Don't, please. Her eyes were pleading, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. Jalen backed off, but he knew the truth. She felt it too. She was just too scared to admit it. A week later, Brandon made his move. He called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Victoria received the notification late at night. Her hands shook as she read the email. He's going to do it, she said. He's going to show them the contract. Jalen sat beside her. Then we tell them the truth. Victoria looked at him. What truth? That we started as a lie? Jalen took her hand. That we started as a lie. But it's not a lie anymore. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Jalen, I can't. Yes, you can, Jalen said. We both can. But Victoria pulled her hand away. You don't understand. If I lose this, I lose everything. Jalen stood. Then we fight together. Victoria looked at him, her walls crumbling. But before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Brandon, she answered, her voice cold. "What do you want?" Brandon's voice came through, smug and victorious. "See you at the meeting, little sister. Bring your husband. This should be fun." The line went dead. Victoria looked at Jalen, fear and determination wearing in her eyes. "This is it," she said. Jalen nodded. "Then, let's end this." The boardroom was cold and sterile, filled with men and women in expensive suits who looked at Jalen like he was an insect under a microscope. Victoria sat beside him, her face carefully blank, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. Brandon stood at the head of the table, a stack of documents in front of him. He looked like a man who'd already won. Victoria's father sat at the opposite end, his face unreadable. Her mother was beside him, watching everything with quiet intensity. Brandon began without preamble. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I've called this meeting because I have evidence that my sister has been deceiving this family and this company." He slid the documents across the table. The board members picked them up, flipping through the pages. Jalen could see copies of the contract, his financial records, everything. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Brandon continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Victoria hired Jalen Bennett to pose as her husband. It's all here. A contract marriage, a transaction. She's been lying to all of us to secure her inheritance." Murmurs rippled through the room. The board members exchanged glances. Jalen felt his stomach twist. Brandon turned to Victoria, his smile sharp. "Do you deny it?" Victoria stood slowly. Her voice was steady, but Jalen could hear the strain beneath it. "No, I don't deny it." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, shocked and angry. Brandon's smile widened, but Victoria wasn't finished. She raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. "We did start with a contract," Victoria said. "Jalen needed help. I needed a solution to a problem. It was a business arrangement. Nothing more." Brandon leaned forward. "So, you admit you lied. You admit you manipulated this family to keep control of the company." Victoria's eyes were cold. "I admit that I made a choice to protect what I built, a choice to survive in a family that values power over people." Her father's expression didn't change, but her mother was watching Victoria carefully. Victoria turned to the board. "Yes, it started as a contract, but if you're here to judge me for that, then you're missing the point. This company doesn't care about love or marriage. It cares about results. And I've delivered results. I've grown this company by 40% in the last 3 years. I've secured contracts that no one else could. I've earned my place here." Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't about results. This is about integrity. You lied to everyone in this room." Jalen couldn't stay silent anymore. He stood. "She didn't lie," he said. Every head in the room turned to him. Brandon's eyes narrowed. Jalen's voice was steady, though his heart was racing. "Victoria told you the truth. We started with a contract. But what she didn't tell you is that it's not a contract anymore." Victoria looked at him, her eyes going wide. Jalen continued, his gaze locked on hers. "I signed that contract because I was desperate. I was broke, about to lose everything, and she offered me a way out. I didn't know her. I didn't care about her. I just wanted to survive." He turned to face the board. "But then I lived with her. I saw who she really is. Not the CEO, not the cold, untouchable woman everyone thinks she is. I saw someone who works herself to exhaustion because she cares about this company. Someone who spent her entire life proving she's good enough. Someone who's scared of being alone." Victoria's breath hitched, but she didn't interrupt. Jalen's voice softened. "Somewhere along the way, it stopped being an arrangement. I stopped pretending, and I think she did too." He turned back to Victoria, his eyes searching hers. "I love you. I don't care about the contract. I don't care about the money. I love you because you're the strongest, most stubborn, most brilliant person I've ever met. And if that makes me a fool, then I'm a fool." No one spoke. Victoria stared at him, tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Brandon's voice cut through the moment. "This is pathetic. You expect us to believe this? That a broke, desperate man suddenly fell in love with one of the richest women in the country? This is just another lie. Before anyone could respond, the door to the boardroom opened. Victoria's mother stood. She walked to the center of the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. "That's enough, Brandon," she said. Brandon frowned. "Mother, you can't." Victoria's mother held up a hand. "I said enough." She turned to the board. "I've been listening to this discussion with great interest, and I think it's time I clarified a few things." Victoria's father leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Victoria's mother continued. "I knew about the contract from the beginning." The room exploded again. Brandon's face went pale. "You what?" he said. Victoria's mother didn't flinch. "Victoria came to me before she made the arrangement. She told me everything, and I approved it." Victoria's eyes went wide. "You knew?" Her mother nodded. "I did, and I'll tell you why. Victoria, you've spent your entire life thinking that strength means shutting people out, that love is a weakness, that you have to do everything alone. I wanted to teach you that you were wrong." She looked at Jalen. "I wanted to see if you could find someone who would see past the walls you built, someone who would care about you, not your money or your power, and I wanted to see if you could let someone in." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her mother smiled sadly. "Because you needed to figure it out on your own." She turned to Brandon. "As for you, Brandon, you've spent years trying to undermine your sister. You've manipulated, schemed, and lied to get what you want. You think this company should be yours because you're the oldest, because you're a man, but you've never earned it. You've never had to." Brandon's face was red. "This is ridiculous. You can't." Victoria's mother's voice turned cold. "I can, and I will. As of today, you are removed from the board of directors. Your shares will be transferred to Victoria, and you will have no further involvement in this company." Brandon stood, his chair scraping loudly. "You can't do this." Victoria's father finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "She can, and I support her decision." Brandon looked around the room, but no one met his eyes. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Silence filled the space. Victoria's mother turned to her daughter. "Victoria, I've watched you build this company from nothing. You've proven yourself 1,000 times over. You don't need my approval anymore. You don't need anyone's approval, but you do need to stop being afraid of letting people in." She glanced at Jalen. "This man loves you, and unless I'm very much mistaken, you love him, too." Victoria looked at Jalen. Her walls were gone. Her mask had shattered. She was just a woman standing in front of a man, terrified and vulnerable and real. "I do," Victoria whispered. "I love him." Jalen crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking. The board members looked at each other, then began to stand, quietly, filing out of the room. Victoria's parents were the last to leave. Her mother squeezed Victoria's shoulder as she passed. When the door closed, it was just the two of them. Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I could control this. I thought I could keep it separate, but I couldn't. I fell in love with you, and it terrified me." Jalen cupped her face in his hands. "You don't have to be scared anymore." Victoria laughed through her tears. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be soft." Jalen smiled. "Then we'll figure it out together." He kissed her. And this time there was no camera, no audience, no reason to pretend. It was just them. 6 months later, Jalen stood in the kitchen of the penthouse making pancakes. Maya sat at the counter, swinging her legs, chattering about school. She'd moved back home after the wedding, settling into their new life with surprising ease. Victoria walked in, her hair in a messy bun, wearing one of Jalen's old t-shirts. She kissed Maya on the head, then wrapped her arms around Jalen from behind. "You're going to burn those," she said. Jalen laughed. "I've got it under control." Maya looked up at them and grinned. "Are you guys going to be all lovey-dovey again?" Victoria ruffled her braids. "Probably." Maya made a face, but she was smiling. Later that day, they had a small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. No cameras, no press, no performance. Victoria wore a simple white dress. Jalen wore a suit that actually fit. When the officiant asked if they took each other as husband and wife, they both said yes without hesitation. This time, it was real. 2 years later, Victoria stood in the nursery holding their newborn son. Jalen wrapped his arms around them both, looking down at the tiny face with its warm brown skin. "He has your eyes," Jalen said. Victoria smiled. "And your stubbornness?" Maya peeked through the door. "Can I hold him?" Victoria nodded, and Maya carefully climbed onto the chair, cradling her baby brother with the practiced care of a devoted older sister. Jalen looked at Victoria. "You ever think about how we started?" Victoria leaned into him. "Every day." "Regret it?" Jalen asked. Victoria shook her head. "Not for a second." 5 years later, on a quiet evening, Victoria and Jalen sat on the couch while their 2 children played on the floor. Maya was 11 now, reading a book in the corner. Their son, Isaiah, was building something with blocks. Isaiah looked up. "Mom, how did you and Dad meet?" Victoria and Jalen exchanged a glance. Victoria smiled. "We met because of a contract." Isaiah frowned. "A contract? Like for work?" Jalen nodded. "Sort of. Your mom needed a husband. I needed help. So, we made a deal." Maya looked up from her book, rolling her eyes. "This story, again." Isaiah's eyes went wide. "Wait, so you guys didn't love each other at first?" Victoria shook her head. "No, we didn't." Isaiah looked confused. "Then how did you fall in love?" Victoria looked at Jalen. He smiled and took her hand. "We fell in love," Jalen said, "because we stopped pretending. We stopped trying to be what we thought we should be, and just let ourselves be real." Victoria squeezed his hand. "And because sometimes, the best things in life start in the most unexpected ways." Isaiah thought about that for a moment, then went back to his blocks. Maya smirked. "Still a weird story?" Victoria laughed. "Maybe, but it's our story." Jalen pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "And I wouldn't change a thing." Outside, the city lights twinkled in the distance. Inside, the family sat together, warm and safe and real. Because the best love stories aren't the ones that start perfectly. They're the ones where 2 broken people find each other and choose every single day to love.